Hello, everyone, and welcome to Unfound Live for August 5th of 2024. I am, of course, Unfound Live's host, Ed Densel. Of course, I host the podcast and Unfound Now and Found and everything else, the map analysis videos, and everything for Unfound, of course, except On the Ground, which is for Patreon people, and that is hosted by Assistant Eric. But everything else I do, and that's the way it's been since the beginning. We're coming up here on the 8-year anniversary. One more month, and it'll be 8 years that Unfound has existed. Yes, this is the job that I have had the longest in my life. Now, you may be wondering, well, what was the job you had the longest? Let me think about that. I worked for my family in the car business a little over 4.5 years. And then I worked at Star Trek The Experience for coincidentally, about the same amount of time, about 4.5 years. I worked the stage manager job that I had was like 2005 to 2009. So it was really only 4 years. So it's really not even close. This is a job that I've had easily longer than anything else I've done in my life. And it's really, it is truly crazy when I think about it in those terms. But yes, we're coming up on the 8-year anniversary. I just consider the beginning of September sometime to be the anniversary, although I think technically the first Friday of September of 2016 was when the first episode came out, if anybody's wondering. And I think it was September 2nd, I think. And coincidentally, that is my brother Brian's birthday. So there you go. But I have a great show for you tonight, as is listed in the introduction, in the title for this Unfound Live show tonight. I want to talk to you about Trevor Deely. Deely is a young man who went missing in Dublin, Ireland 24 years ago. We'll be talking about his disappearance because his father recently died. That was in the news. And so I want to give his disappearance some attention. I still have hopes that one of these days we'll actually cover his disappearance on Unfound. The Uvalde school shooting is in the news, and the resource officer has been charged with some crime, so he's going to be going to trial. And so I want to talk about that because that is a crime, and I want to talk a little bit about police. I will also have on the agenda this Ballerina Killer, which caught my eye. Anytime you see ballerina and killer in the same sentence, I guess it's always going to get your attention. And it's a woman who killed her husband, and I want to talk about that. Last week, I didn't get to the disappearance of Cassandra Durham, and I want to talk about her disappearance at least a little bit. But I do it, I have to admit, I do it with the hope that maybe we will feature her disappearance on Unfound sometime soon. I know friend of the program, John Lorden, recently has covered her disappearance, so maybe Unfound wants to give it a shot as well, although you know that I have a thing about following up other shows that have just done disappearances and things. I don't want to ever give anybody the idea that we're trying to, come in on somebody else's coattails or anything like that. So I will contemplate that. We'll see what goes on there. But I do want to talk about that. And I have some other things that hopefully I will get to before the time runs out tonight. Of course, as you are watching tonight, as is always the situation, please give this live show a thumbs up. In fact, just do it right now. You know the show's going to be good. Just give it a thumbs up. You know. And if you're listening to this as on a podcast, starting on August 6th or beyond, in your podcast feed, please take the time on Spotify or on iTunes or wherever else to give this podcast a nice review. It's a very unique type of podcast. It's true crime news podcast. I don't know how many shows out there, podcasts are there like that, where it's more like a news program, like the nightly news or something like that. I don't know how common that is, really. So other than that, as you can see, although given the way this StreamYard program is set up, it's blurred, but I think you can all tell I am back in Florida. I drove back here last Friday, so the day after my birthday, August 1st, and I want to thank all of you for all of the gracious birthday wishes that all of you sent me. Thank you so much. I am now 54. So it's like, remember that show from the 1960s, Car 54, Where Are You? Now it's Ed 54, Where Are You? And so I drove back here on Friday, left about 8 a.m., ran into rain, ran into a lot of construction, so it wasn't the most efficient drive back. I got back here about quarter after midnight, so it was like 16 hours and 15 minutes. It's pretty slow. I've actually done the drive in like 15 hours and 40 minutes or even quicker than that. Yeah, going over the speed limit a little bit, but nothing crazy. But this time the rain slows everybody down. There was a lot of places where the traffic was down to one lane. It all adds up over a drive of 1,000 miles. But I only stopped once to get gas. And when I stopped gas is when I went to the bathroom. I only had to make that one stop. My car is efficient enough. I only have to make one stop as long as, it's absolutely full when I leave my dad's. And as long as if I'm going there, absolutely full when I'm leaving right here where I live, then I can get there in just stopping once for gas. And usually I end up with about 50 miles to go on that tank of gas when I get either here or there, just to give you an idea. It's usually about how it goes. So car's very efficient, even though it has like 113,000 miles on it. And it was a good drive. Listened to a lot of good music. I listened to, what did I listen to? On the way back, I listened to Bruce Dickinson's most recent CD album collection of songs, The Mandrake Project. I listened to Def Leppard's newest album called Diamond Star Halos. I listened to Winger, being that I saw Kip Winger when I was up in Pennsylvania. I listened to their most recent album, which is fantastic. And in fact, of those three, that one is the best. And in fact, I just got a Winger shirt today. I ordered one. It came in the mail on Saturday. So I have that. I just posted it to Facebook. And I also I hadn't listened to this album forever. I would say over 30 years. Pretty sure it's been over 30 years since I listened to this album I'm about to mention. And it's good. Still not as good as the prior era of this band, but it's pretty good. And that album would be Van Halen's 5150. That's the album that has Dreams on it and Love Walks In and The Best of Both Worlds. That album, pretty good. But I am a guy who prefers the David Lee Roth version of Van Halen over the Sammy Hagar version, even though Sammy's a better singer. Certainly. I mean, he can really wail and everything. And I have been doing my voice, practicing my voice. Really, my voice is coming along pretty well. I'm loving it. Still can't do some of the things that Sammy does, but I still just prefer the DLR version of Van Halen. But for the first time, and like I said, it has to be over 30 years that I listened to 5150, enjoyed it. So that's some of the listening that I did. I listened to the most recent episode of the Consult podcast. And so it was a good drive, and it really makes the miles go by pretty quickly. So let me see who's in here right now that we're like 10 minutes in. And then I want to go through some other things, a lot of the personal things. And I do have it on my agenda that somebody had asked me about last week, and I did not forget. Somebody had asked me about my deserted, stuck on a deserted island story that I mentioned last week. And I didn't have a chance to get into it last week, but I said I would go over it this week. So I have to go through that story. I have to keep my word. I know many of you have heard it. Maybe some of you haven't, but it's a pretty funny story. But if you'll remember last week when I brought it up under the context of these two people who have gone missing in the Bahamas. You're in this beautiful place and you don't think anything bad can happen, and then something bad happens. And so that's why I even brought it up last week. And then somebody's like, well, I've never heard that story before. So I will get into that all in due course. So let's first see who is in here tonight. Charles, good to see you. Got to see your mother last week. She's doing fantastic. Got to see your father as well. My dad and I went over there. We went over to Salem, Ohio, had lunch. It was a good time. Hello, everything. Karen, Hazel. Hazel said, just bathed by baby Chi-Chi. Still drying myself off. So is that Chihuahua, Hazel? Kathy, good to see you tonight. Thanks for joining in tonight. Leanne, good to see you. And Lisa, good to see you. Glenn, I'm gonna do my best to answer your question. The Ask Me, Glenn. As you might understand, can't go into it specifically, get into specifics, but I can give you some generalities, and I'll get to that eventually. Stephanie, I'll get to my birthday. Thank you, Lisa. Macy, good to see you. Taylor, what's going on? Mary Jane from Maryland. That seems to make sense. Lisa loves Van Halen. Mary Jane, you need to sing for us. Not yet. Charlie agrees with me. DLR is better. Yeah, and David Lee Roth was a New York City paramedic. That is true, Glenn. I knew that. And I haven't heard before, so welcome hearing the story. Hazel wants to hear the deserted island story. Okay. So thank you, everybody, for joining in tonight. And please remember to give this show a thumbs up. Some other things, of course, we had this hurricane that was supposed to hit here. It didn't hit here, but it went right out there that way and hit up kind of in the Panhandle area, I guess, technically. But it dumped a ton of rain here, a ton of rain. I heard that here in the Clearwater area, we got like a foot of rain. And it was really coming down. It was windy, not crazy windy, but it was windy. But the rain was the thing, and it was moving very slowly. And now all that area that I just drove through, like South Carolina, South Carolina and Georgia area, where I'm coming down that way when I was driving down there on Friday, just getting hammered with rain now because this system's moving very slowly. It's going to be flooding everywhere. But Sarasota, south of me, really got flooded. I'm guessing down in Madeira Beach, where I used to live, it got hit pretty hard as well. As far as rain, not wind damage, but rain damage. Up here on the 8th floor of my building, it was pretty much business as usual. Although I did do that video, maybe some of you saw it, where I showed that when the wind gets blowing this way, so it's blowing directly south or directly north with this building, you get this weird pressure difference between one side of the building and the other. and gets to the point where the sliding glass door, it's so weird. It's so suctioned because of the wind. It's so suctioned into place, you can't slide it. That's how much air pressure is on the door. It's really crazy. And I've even gotten some times where even my front door, which is right over here, it's just a regular hinge door. It's gotten to the point sometimes where the wind is like that, you can't open the front door. You can, but you really have to tug on it. And for sure, had I experimented, had I opened this sliding glass door, let's say this time last night, 9:00 Sunday night, if I'd have opened this sliding glass door, given how the wind was, opened this sliding glass door and then opened the front door of my place, everything in the air would have been in the air. That's how the wind acts in this building when you get up to this level. The pressure difference, and the wind is finding any way, looking for any opening. You open one of these doors and you open this little artery between one side of the building and the other, the air is just gonna, I don't even think about it. I've never done it. Maybe one of these days I'll think about doing it, but it would have been something. Everything in this place probably would have been blowing around. That's how forceful it is. So, but I'm fine. And there was no flooding up where I live, but south of here, as is usually the case, because of the way it faces, the issue that they have down there is that it faces southwest. And so the winds and everything, the water is going directly in there. Whereas my place doesn't even technically face, the shore here doesn't even technically face west. It technically faces northwest. And that's really, really what saves this area from a lot of storm surge and everything. It can make just that little bit of difference which way the shore is facing and which way these storms come up here. We're very fortunate. Whereas south of here, where the coastline begins to turn and it starts facing southwest, it gets hit a lot harder as far as wind and with rain. So what's everybody saying about that? Yes, I haven't heard about it. Chinese created X Chihuahua. Remember the big fluffy ears. I'm not familiar with that dog, Hazel. I'm not familiar with that kind of dog. So I'm sorry. I love puppies though. But my dad and I had a great time. I was up there. I don't know where the time goes. It was almost 3 weeks. And we did the usual stuff we do. And I'm up there with my dad, go up to Slippery Rock University, go to the places that he eats. He knows all the waitresses and everything. And so I drove back here. If this happens to come up, if my left arm happens to come up you might be wondering, well, what's going on there, Ed? Why do you have this brace? I jammed my wrist. It must have been when I went out and disc golfed at Moraine that one day. Because it surely was not hurting before that, because I would not have gone out. It's one of those things that I think I did something and it didn't hurt right at the time, but then it started to ache. And finally got back here and it was still aching. I mean, I could still use it and everything. But it's one of those things, with any like ankle or sprain or wrist thing, it can heal, but it's not going to heal as long as you keep using it. And I did jam this wrist like 16 years ago, falling through a screen door, I wasn't drunk or anything. That's a story for another day. And I fell on my wrist and really messed it up and had to put a brace on it. Well, I must have done the same kind of thing. I think it was out while I was disc golfing and it was just aching and said, I got to put like a brace on it so I don't move it around. So that's what's going on here. And I'm sure it'll be fine, but I just got to give it a few days. It's been in this brace. I got this thing on Saturday. So that's what's going on. If you happen to see my left hand or arm the rest of the show tonight. All right. And I may be taking a week off here. And when I say a week off, no live show and no podcast here within the next couple weeks. My brother Brian and I have been talking about this trip, RV trip, for like a week. The issue is that I'm kind of behind on my podcast work, to be honest. And I don't like getting behind, and I'm not going to have both. I'm not going to be behind on my podcast, and I'm not going to go on a trip because of that. So to be able to go on the trip, I have to get caught up with my podcast work that I have to do, and in fact, work ahead a little bit. So we'll see. I'll keep you all posted. I'm going to do what I can to work ahead. But when I'm up seeing my dad, yes, the podcast gets done, as you can see. Still did the live show and everything. But a lot of other things like working ahead, contacting people, following up on calls and everything. I don't get a lot of that kind of work done when I'm seeing my dad because I have to devote time to talking, hanging out with him. So it just may be too many things stacking up here, going up there for 3 weeks and then going on a trip with my brother. It might be just things too close to each other. But I'll let you know. But it does feel to me somewhere, sometime, that I'm just going to take an entire week off. No live show, no podcast. Because he and I have been talking about taking an RV trip for a week, going down to the Keys and all this stuff. But I can't do that if I'm already behind on my podcast work. Because doing that is only going to put me more behind. And then I get all ticked off at myself. So just keep that in mind. All right. One more thing. One more story. And I will get into the agenda for tonight's show. Well, I have to go through this stuck on a deserted island story, being that I brought it up last week and somebody asked me about it. See, at least a big week for me. My daughter turned 16 on Thursday, got her driver's license, and I moved my son into his dorm yesterday. So your daughter and I have the same birthday, Lisa, right? August 1st. So she turned 16 this past Thursday, August 1st. Is that right? Hello, Jane. How are you? Good to see you. So here is my stuck on a deserted island story, and this just shows you how quickly having a nice little vacation for a few days can get dangerous before you know it. All right. So, yes, she does. August 1st. That's spectacular, Lisa. The year was 1996. In fact, we're coming up on almost to the day, what would it be? Almost exactly 28 years ago. This happened in August of 1996. So I just turned 26, and the woman that I was dating at the time, her birthday is also in August. She is also a Leo. And I think we went on this trip somewhere around her birthday, which I think is like August 10th, August 11th, August 12th. We've been through this before. I've dated quite a few women whose birthdays are in early August. It's really weird. Just like mine. I don't know. But we decided that we were going to take a kind of a short trip to the island of St. Martin in the Caribbean. And St. Martin is an island that's shared with the French and the Dutch. And so we were going to leave on a Friday morning, come back on a Monday night. And so we flew from Pittsburgh that Friday morning. We flew to JFK. And then we flew from JFK to the island of St. Martin. And we landed. It's a very famous airport. It's one of the most dangerous airports in the world. And it's that airport, if you've ever seen it, the planes come in real low and the people can almost touch the jets as it's coming like over the fence and everything. It's that airport. That's the island of St. Martin. I've been there. And we had a place reserved So you land on the Dutch side, but our place was on the French side. And so we landed, we go over there, and that's where this all happened, just to give you an idea. So one day, it must have been, wasn't the next, it might have been that Sunday or something, the Sunday that we were there. We were in, there's a place on the French side called Orient Bay, and it's like a half moon shaped kind of bay type of situation. And out in the middle, I don't know if it's like a quarter mile away or a half mile out into the water, there is an island there. There's an island there. And what they were doing is they would take people who wanted to go, you could pay somebody, they would take you out to a motorboat, out in a little motorboat. They would take you out there to that island that's otherwise uninhabited. And you could take snorkel gear and you could swim around, and there's like a sunken ship and all sorts of things. So we wanted to do that. So we didn't bring snorkeling. We, I guess, rented it or something. And we found a guy, this young kid or something, to drive us out to this island. And we thought he spoke English. Of course, like I said, it's like a French and Dutch island and everything. And I just, once again, there's some of these things. But the understanding was that he would come back, I don't know, in an hour and a half. That was the understanding. But the thing was, we were kind of going out in the afternoon. It wasn't like an early morning thing. So it was like, we must have gone out in the afternoon, like 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock or something like that. And like I said, it's like a half mile or something out into this bay. And the island is not that big. There's no buildings on it, no man-made structures on it. It's a building. It has some trees and everything, but nothing that's man-made there. So they drop you off. So if you need to bring food or water or something, you have to take it with you. And so when we get out there, there are other people out there. So other people had taken this opportunity. And so, there's other people out there, and we just start swimming around this island. Okay. And, being that I want to keep, me, I'm all about the PG rating for the podcast and everything we do. But let's just say this was like an adult-oriented type of location. Let's just put it that way. So we're out there, and we're snorkeling around. It was great. It was fantastic. And we're just minding our own business. And like I said, there are other people out there, and they're swimming around. We're swimming around and checking out, snorkeling. But what happened was that, we finally said, I don't think we just kind of got the feeling, we've been out here for a while. Let's swim back to shore. And that kid's going to be coming back out here, and, we'll be out of here. And, it's hot out. It was like August in the Caribbean, it's like 90 some degrees. So we get back to shore. And what we first noticed, she and I noticed, is there was nobody else there. Nobody was on the island anymore. So while we were doing our thing, all these other people had been there, had left. Maybe they had their own boats, or somebody had come to get them, or whatever else. Everybody else was gone except she and I. Weren't too really bothered by that, because like I said, we had an understanding that this kid was going to be coming back out here and everything. And frankly, I don't know how well we prepared. We did not bring a lot of water or anything. Should have, but we didn't. Once again, this is how you get into the situations, not thinking ahead. And so we're waiting, and we're waiting. And it's a half mile. It's not like 10 miles. It's a half mile. You can see the shore. You can see actually where we rented the snorkel, and we can see the boat, and we can see people. But we can start start understanding that, you know what? It's been an hour. And she must have had a watch. I never had any. I never wear watches. She must have had a watch or something. This was like before cell phones. It was like an hour went by, and then it was an hour and a half, and then it was 2 hours that we'd been out there. And he was supposed to come get us, like I said, hour and a half. He wasn't coming out. And there's nobody around. There are people going by in boats, but they're not coming anywhere near the island. We're stuck on this island. And it was, like I said, it's like a half mile to shore, not something that you would really want to swim, especially since there were boats going back and forth, and you could easily have gotten hit by a boat. Very easily. Not safe to swim from here to shore. Just too many boats going back and forth. And we're starting to think, you know what? We might be stuck here. Seriously, it was a serious situation. You can laugh about it now, but it was a serious situation. And so I figure, you know what I got to do? I got to go out into this water and somehow try to flag down one of these other boats that is going by. Even though they're not coming really that close to the island, I have to try to get somebody's attention. So I wade out into the water. Well, the water gets deep fairly quickly. It's not like out here in the Gulf where if you walk out, I mean, out here, you could walk out like 300 feet and it'd still only be up to like, I'm 5'9", up to my waist or something. It really, really gradually gets deep out here in the Gulf because I've done it. They're complete opposite. You could only walk out maybe, I don't know, 100 feet, and the water was already over my head. And I figured that out pretty quickly. And so I'm out there, and I'm like up to my neck, and I'm like waving my arms. Nobody's paying any attention to me. Nobody. Zero. And so I look back to shore, the woman who's with me, we've been going out for like, I don't know, since like February of that year or something like that. And I'm looking back at her and she can see, I'm not having any success, but, I'm looking at these boats going back and forth and I'm looking at her. I'm looking back at these boats and I'm looking at her. And like I said, let's just say there wasn't a lot of clothing involved. And I'm looking at her. I'm looking at the boats going by. And I thought to myself, probably a naked or near naked woman is more likely to catch boaters' attention than I am. Because I have to admit, most of the people driving these boats were guys. So I'm thinking, even though she was like, 5'1" or 5'2", I'm thinking if she comes out here not wearing much, that she's more likely to get somebody's attention than I am. It just I kept looking back and I was like, yeah, I think that makes sense. So I go back to shore and I tell her, this is my idea. You go out there, even though you can't wade out there as far as I can, but you're you, I'm me. Look at who's driving these boats. Who's more likely to catch people's attention? She agreed. She went out there, not wearing much. And like within a minute, I'm not making this up. I am not making this up. Within a minute, a boat stopped for her. Not making this. I don't know how long I was out there. 5 minutes, 10 minutes trying to flag a boat down. She went out there like that. And a boat stopped. Not making this up. But the problem was that the boat was like a very small boat and it couldn't hold me. And what was funny is the boat's out there and she has to get into the boat. And, she had a problem getting into the boat. We'll not even get into that. But she finally gets into the boat, and she is, and she says, "I'll come back for you. I'll go into shore. I'll get that guy that was supposed to come and get us in the first place, and I'll come out and get you." So, and I said, "Okay," but then I'm thinking, what if this is some serial killer who picked her up? That was the next thing that went through my mind. Once again, this is how a really nice vacation can go bad quickly. So this is what I think about when we talk about disappearances like in the Bahamas or anywhere else, because I was kind of in that situation myself where everything was great until it wasn't great, and things you don't even expect. And so I'm thinking, what if this was some like serial killer or rapist? And there were like 3 guys in the boat. So 3 strange guys, and my girlfriend is now in the boat with them. And I'm thinking, what did I just do here? What did I just do? Fortunately, the boat absolutely made a beeline for shore. She told them what she needed. Right away, there was no question. I was like, whew. Now here comes the funny part. So I see her, like I said, it's close enough that you can see, but not long enough that, it's short enough that you can see, but so far that you wouldn't want to swim it. I see her get to shore. I see her get out of the boat, and I see her get that guy, and she gets in the boat with that other kid, and they start coming out here. So everything is going to be fixed, but there's like Aesop's fable. There's a moral to the story of this, which is hilarious. And so that kid and her are pulling up, and she is just laughing her butt off. I mean, I'm not laughing at all. But the boat's pulling into the island where I still am, and she is just laughing. And I'm like, what are you laughing about? What are you laughing about? And she tells me. Now, of course, remember, we're on the island of St. Martin. It's Dutch and French. Lot of tourists from around the world. Certainly there are Americans there, but mostly it's people from other countries who are there. And she proceeded to tell me, and I was thinking, well, she probably got picked up by a couple French guys or people who live here on the island or something like that. No, the reason she was laughing was this. The guys in the boat were guys, but they were teenagers driving their parents' boat. 2 17-year-olds and a 15-year-old. And what she proceeded to tell me, and just to be straight about that, she was topless. 2 17-year-old American teenager boys and a 15-year-old American teenager boy in their parents', must have been a friend or something, their parents' boat. And what she told me was, she goes, here's what happened when I got in the boat and we were riding into shore. She told me the 2 teenage 17-year-olds couldn't take their eyes off of her, but the 15-year-old was so embarrassed he couldn't look at her. And then, of course, I brought up, I'm just wondering what these kids, when they had to go back to school that fall, that I can only imagine what they wrote about. What did you do on your summer vacation? Because really what they did was they rescued, no doubt, attractive young woman, my girlfriend at the time. They rescued a beautiful topless woman from a deserted island during their summer vacation. So I can just imagine them writing that story when they got to the next grade in high school. And so we had a good laugh about that, but this shows you, and it's a funny story. It's one of my favorite stories from my life of all time. The woman who I still know, I've talked to her once in a while, knows that I tell this story once in a while. She doesn't care. And it's one of my favorite stories. But that's why I always said yes. Once in my life, I was stranded on a deserted island with a beautiful woman. That happened. That actually happened. But this just shows you the moral of the story is that this is how things that are so great vacation, had a great time, stayed in a nice place, had great food, beautiful weather. Just being out down there as a couple, although obviously I'm still single, so it didn't work out. But I had a great time and everything else. But this just shows you how something good can go bad so quickly. And it wasn't even having anything to do with any bad person that we ran into. It's misadventure. Had something happened and we wouldn't have gotten anybody, and we would have had to stay out there all night or something, without any shelter or whatever else, and without any water, and had to wait till the next day when they started bringing more people back out to this island. Who knows what would have happened? Who knows? Maybe I got the bright idea trying to swim to shore. In 26, maybe I could have done it, but do you really want to chance it? But this just shows you how when we start thinking about disappearances and misadventures and what happens, I was in that situation where it easily could have gone a different direction. Now, granted, in the end, it couldn't have gone much better. And we even got a great, funny story out of it. And these kids who are now, 28 years later, they're 28 and 17, they're into their 40s now. I'm sure they still remember that topless, beautiful woman they picked up when they were on vacation in St. Martin in their parents' boat. I'm sure that's a story they tell to this day, wherever they are. Because they were from America, and I remember they were from the state of Georgia. So everybody wins, I guess. But it easily could have been something different. Because maybe that kid I really don't even remember what happened, but did he misunderstand us? Did he just pretend he understood it was supposed to be an hour? I don't even remember. We didn't take enough water. Probably should have taken more clothing. And, on and on and on and on and on. But we didn't. And so, like I said, it's a funny story, but I think that when we start thinking about misadventures and we start talking about people who go missing on vacation places, whether it's scuba diving or snorkeling or boating or going on a walk somewhere, like we had this disappearance or the young man died in Tenerife. We had that other guy who died somewhere walking somewhere. Was he a dentist or something? Somewhere. He died, had a heart attack or heat exhaustion, and he died. We have Taylor Casey, the most recent Unfound now. She goes missing in the Bahamas. We have the guy like 10 years ago who also went missing there. These are the kind of things that can happen when you let your guard down. Whereas I can guarantee you, if she and I would have been in the United States under similar conditions, probably we make better decisions. But because we're in the island of St. Martin and having a great time and it's so exotic and everything, these are things that get away from you. But that is my stuck on a deserted island story. So there you go. That's the story. I think maybe that's the third time I've told this on the live show, but this is the first time in the context of understanding how people can get into bad situations when they don't expect it. And in a misadventure, when you think you're doing something safe and you're really not. Perfect, absolutely perfect example of that. It could have gone, I'm not saying that we would have died out there, but It very well could have been that we would have been stuck there had we not been able to flag down that. She wouldn't have flagged down that boat. That we're out there overnight. Because, like I said, we were out there. Came back from snorkeling and everything. There was nobody else there. And we were there for like I don't know, half hour, 45 minutes before she got picked up. And not one boat ever came back out to that island. Could have been bad. Hazel's asking nudist speech. Do I have to be that explicit, Hazel? Yes, Mad Dog is in the house. Nude beach where Kelly, you are very generous. Thank you, Kelly. Hitting the super chat button that is down there at the bottom for everybody in the little, I think they've made a green button out of it with a dollar sign. That's what Kelly has done. Kelly, thank you so much with the super sticker. Thank you so much. You're very generous. Thank you for joining us tonight. Everything says you lucky kids. Yeah, you think everything. Hazel says that's funny. Everything laughs. Stephanie, a lot of things like this are just down to luck, running into the right people instead of the wrong ones, having serious repercussions for a bad decision that someone walked away from. All right. Yeah. Seriously. She went out there. She had her bottoms on, but that was it. And luckily she gets picked up by 3 American teenagers and not some bad guy. A bunch of bad guys that are cruising around, who knows? I mean, they're cruising around everywhere. They could have taken off with her, and I would have not been able to stop it at all. And I still would have been stuck on the island. Easily could have happened. That's what I'm talking about. Glenn, when I was in Guadalupe, they were all topless on all beaches. Yeah, well, this is even less than that, Glenn. So there you go. We're all adults here. So there you go. That's that story. It's a personal ed story, but it's a safety video as well. So there you go. Somebody wanted to hear it. Some people wanted to hear it. Hazel, it seems, had not heard it before. That's the story. All right, let's move on to the rest of the programming for tonight. Like I said, that was way back in 1996. I was 26 years old. I'm more than twice that age now. Crazy. So crazy. I don't know where the time goes. I remember that vacation like it was yesterday. I remember the jets that we flew on. I remember where we ate. And I have I have some pictures from that vacation, PG pictures, by the way. I have them somewhere in one of my albums in my closet. So there you go. All right, let's get to the David Kallenberger poll. That was, of course, the episode that came out this past Friday. David Kallenberger went missing in 2016. His motorcycle was found along the side of the road there on I-65 in Indiana, and he is still missing over 8 years later. I posted the poll in the discussion group, and I do hope that if you are in the group that you take part in these polls. These polls are certainly helpful to me in getting and understanding what all of you are thinking. And overwhelmingly, I would say 71% in the discussion group, the answer was Valerie caused David's disappearance. So his wife, yes, it is true. There was a car out there. You're believing the story, I guess, that yes, she was out there and that she did pick him up. And then something happened. You don't necessarily have to believe the tarp story or some of the other things that we talked about. But 71% of the respondents in that poll said, yep, Valerie caused David's disappearance. The next most common answer with only 19% was that he walked off. So 71% foul play, 19% he walked off, and only 10% thought that somebody else could have caused his disappearance. Now, in the think tank, and I will remind you once again, in fact, I'm going to be doing a reminder here in the discussion group in Facebook over the next few days about Patreon and everything. Maybe we need to remind everybody of what goes on there. But in the think tank on Patreon, we came to a completely different conclusion. In fact, I think everybody decided. Of course, the think tank is a very small group. I think we might have had 6 or 7 people there last night. It's a private group. You have to be at the premium level, the highest level on Patreon to take part in the discussion. We do that on Sunday evenings at 7:00. And at the end, I always ask people what their theories are regarding the disappearance. And with no exceptions, the conclusion was that David walked off on his own. So once again, it's very common. Discussion group thinks it's foul play. The think tank members thinks it's a walk-off. Somewhat common. Me, I write a blog at patreon.com. I talk about that at the end of every episode. I want you to check that out. Patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. It's right there along the bottom of the screen. And I also came to the same conclusion that David most likely walked off. And I write 3,000 words, but just in a nutshell, it just seems a guy who was obviously paranoid, had some health things going on, and then his wife turns around and kills him. Certainly possible, but I don't think that's probable. David was displaying a lot of behaviors that I think that when we've covered some other disappearances like his, where people maybe are paranoid or have some sort of addiction or everything, something else like that, seeing reality or imagining their own reality, let's say, very rarely is the result foul play. So that's what I really based my conclusion on. But I do go through some of these. I know I talked about a few different topics in the summation. I expound on all of those topics in the blog. So if you want to check that out, once again, patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. And Hazel is pointing out, they've never done any searches out there. And I think the reason they haven't is because I think everybody has been too caught up in the foul play scenario. Certainly possible. There are no facts to rule out the idea that David was murdered by somebody. However, if you're not going to even do any searches around that area, 1 mile in any direction, that is a huge gaping hole in the investigation, in my opinion. You got to do it. And I realize a lot of searches fail and everything else. You still have to do it, but I'm not saying get crazy. You don't have to go 10 miles in any direction. Just a mile, maybe not even that, a half mile in any direction from where the bike was. And just to see what you might find. Now, granted, it's been 8 years. So, but I think it's easy to think foul play when there have never been any searches done in the area. So, David Kallenberger, it was, I do my daily missing persons reading every day. I may be the only person on the face of the earth that reads missing persons news every day, looking up, going to NamUs, going to the Charlie Project, looking up different names that I may run across. And that, of course, as you can understand, when you hear about a guy who's out there with his motorcycle and then he's not there, but the motorcycle is, that's going to catch anybody's attention. And I was just very fortunate that, when I contacted Kim, that we got along very well from the beginning. Now, I realize that, as you could probably tell in the interview, she certainly believes that David was murdered, and she certainly thinks that Valerie did it. I don't think that, but as I continue to say, that never gets in the way of me wanting to help. I will continue to be objective. It's totally fine by me if they think something different. They're going to come to me for advice. I'm going to give them objective advice. It's never been a situation where I'm going to reject them because they don't think like I do. However, I will say there have been some guests who have ceased talking to me because I don't think like they do. That has happened. I'm not going to get into who some of those guests. In fact, I don't know if I can name every one of it. It doesn't happen a lot, but there are a few that are in my head right now of unsolved disappearances that I would never, of course, mention, where we just, kind of had a falling out because of that. So, it happens. That happens. People get really locked in on a particular way of thinking, and I don't know, just don't want to hear what I have to say anymore. It's their disappearance. I'm here to help, but they're the ones who have been emotionally affected by it. I feel bad for all of these people, but they can decide the kind of help that they want and the kind of help that they don't want. But I will just tell all of you that I've never based any help on just, on whether the person thinks like I do. That has never happened. And so that does lead me, though, to Glenn's question. See how I did that, Glenn? You like that? You like that, Glenn? What they call a segue? So Glenn asked me a question before the show got started tonight, and it's a very good one. I did get a question asked about Jennifer Cassie, and I'm not really getting into that. Clarice, I appreciate the question, but we've talked about Jennifer Cassie so much on this show, and I don't think I have to say I don't think I'm ever going to be able to cover that disappearance because, once again, a difference of opinion. But Glenn asked me, with the understanding that private conversations with guests and families are confidential, I was curious about an overall breakdown of how families feel about the thoughts generated from the think tank and the live show. First of all of you should know Glenn, who is in the you can see him in the chat. He is a member of the think tank, probably one of the newest members of the think tank. And Glenn, I certainly do appreciate the support, and I hope you're enjoying being a think tank member and supporting Unfound through Patreon. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. And this is a question that, like I said, I don't think that I've gotten it specifically before. I think maybe I've come, randomly talked about this while doing this live show, but I don't think anybody's ever specifically asked me this. And I would just say, of course, like you said, I can't get into because of conversations. It's mixed, Glenn, and for everybody else, it's mixed. That's the best way. That I think sometimes that they appreciate that I wanted to interview them and they get to talk about the disappearance the way they want. But a lot of these guests are very set in their ways. And as you would imagine, those people tend to be the ones who have disappearances that are quite old. So we start getting up toward the average age of a disappearance that we feature on Unfound, which is like over 20 years old. And they get very locked in, still cordial with them. But I do think sometimes when after I, talk to them somewhere down the road and I tell them about some of the things that are discussed in, what we discussed in the think tank, that, maybe sometimes I sound crazy. And I think the reason, of course, I'm not crazy. And in fact, instead, I'm the exact opposite. I think I'm as based in reality as any person you're ever going to find regarding disappearances. But this is one of those situations where and this can occur in anything, not just in disappearances, but anything in life. When people are so locked in on one slice of an overall large topic, but they're locked in on that one particular slice for so long, they think they know everything about the entire topic, but they don't. So, take any particular disappearance, and I'll just name one that's been solved so nobody, gets, it doesn't get weird here. For example, and I can say like Crystal Morrison, being that somebody just brought, you brought Crystal up, Glenn, in there. I of course, given that I didn't know as much as I do now about disappearances, I got that one wrong. But myself and her sister Michelle, who was the guest, continue to get along fantastically to this day. Continue to get fantastic, but the issue is that any family like Michelle's, they get very locked in on Crystal's disappearance. Like I said, it's solved, so we know what has happened now. So this isn't an unsolved one where a lot of question marks still. But they get locked in, and then you start to gather all of this information about all these other disappearances. And what happens was eventually Crystal's starts to look like a walk-off instead of foul play, which was, I have to admit, is what I originally thought it was. Now, for, going back once again to Crystal's, Michelle is always going to be the expert on her disappearance, on her sister's disappearance, always. Very sad what happened. Very sad. But she is always going to be that person. I am never going to be an expert on any one particular disappearance. Why? Because we feature a different disappearance every week. And although I have a pretty good memory of all these disappearances, I will admit over time I forget some of the finer details. But I can tell you, give me a name of a missing person we featured on Unfound, and I can go through the general facts and things. Although I might get the year wrong and everything, but I have a general understanding. But what I am is, I'm an overseer. I'm looking at the big picture of all disappearances and then trying to apply that to the disappearance that is featured that week. That's what I do. And that's how I would say I've become a missing persons expert. But it's hard, especially when people are so locked in and they've been living with the same disappearance, let's say for 20 years. Here comes this guy in who's only been doing it for 8 years and is, trying to tell them things. Well, you didn't know my missing loved one. You didn't know this. You didn't know that. And what I think we've learned is that probably having the big picture of disappearances and understanding the statistics and hearing a lot of the same stories over and over again is better at figuring out what happened in a disappearance than if somebody is just so caught up in one disappearance and nothing else for many years. And this doesn't even have to do necessarily with family members. I think that it also can happen with advocates. I think it can happen with private investigators. You know my opinion on them, but which isn't very high. But people who get what I would say locked in or even obsessed with a particular disappearance, in my opinion, at some point they can't see the forest for the trees. They're working hard. I love it. I love that they're engaged and everything. But my opinion is they don't realize they need help. They don't realize that there's another way to think about all of this that can be enlightening. And of course, there's the human ego too. Nobody wants to work on something for 20 years and then have somebody come in and say, you know what, you're probably wrong about that. Even though I keep the statistics. In fact, we're putting together a huge database right now here at Unfound that's even going to help more. Some people end up taking that personally. They do. That's their disappearance. They're gonna choose to do what they're gonna do. Whereas, as you would suspect, with disappearances that aren't as old, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, my perception is those people, they're a little more open-minded to hearing other thoughts. Nobody wants to work at something for 20 years and then be told, you know what, you've probably been going about this the wrong way. Even though I know that to be true with many, many of the disappearances that we've featured on Unfound. And unfortunately, some of these people have to find out the hard way. And it's sad. So in coming back, to Glenn's question, how they feel about the thoughts generated from the think tank and the live show, not so much the live show, mainly the think tank, being that we really get into the nitty gritty of these disappearances. Like I said, Glenn and everybody else, it's mixed. It depends on the person. It depends on how old the disappearance is. It depends on how locked in these people are, how open-minded they are. It depends on how clear-cut the disappearance is. It depends. Some of these disappearances that we've featured, many of them are pretty, I think, straightforward. Whether it's just a walk-off or foul play, we have a lot of those that are pretty straightforward. And so there's not a lot of room for disagreement there. There may be disagreement on what needs to be done now, but myself and the guest and the family are on the same page as to actually what happened. On that certainly helps. But we get into those ones where it's much more subjective. Maybe we might even bring up David Kallenberger's disappearance, covered this past Friday. And that's a different that the tone of those conversations is usually a little different. But I'm always here to help. However, like I said, there have been a few people who eventually didn't want to have anything to do with me. And it's not because I'm rude or anything. It's not. But, I'm one of these people that I can't ignore things that are in front of me. I'm not a very good guy about, everything in my life, I don't think I lie to myself too much. I'm very hard. In fact, I'm very hard on myself. If you were to get to know me very, very well, probably overtly honest with myself. So when it comes to things that I think I know, I'm not going to, butter people up. And see, this is why I don't consider myself an advocate. My experience, missing persons advocates, they're willing to tell family anything because they feel sorry for them and they don't want to hurt their feelings and all these things. That's not what I do. That's not what I do. I'm a reporter. I ask the questions. They can come on here, and as long as we're keeping everything factual, I'm certainly happy to sit here and just ask the questions and keep it all organized and everything. But when it comes to the counseling and me telling them about my 340 disappearances of experience, I think I have a responsibility to use that to help them. And some people think it's helpful. Some people don't. Some people think that the police are better equipped, know more about disappearances than I do. I think they're wrong. Some people will more rely on their private investigator that they've had for 20 years instead of believing me. Good luck with that. Good luck with that. Doesn't get in the way of me helping these people, but in some of these situations, I'm considered to be third, fourth, fifth, or 10th most helpful. Whereas my opinion is I should be number one most helpful. So that answers your, I hope that answers your question, Glenn. Some people that can't thank me enough for the insight and that we get from the think tank and that I get from other places. And then some people say, no, we're just kind of happy doing it the way we're doing it. Okay. Let's see what everybody is. Once again, Kelly, thank you so much tonight. Things we did way back when, going back to the prior story. Yeah. Amy says Valerie was definitely involved. Okay. Hazel says, my thoughts are his remains may eventually be found not far from where he was last seen. Statistically, that is, if he did walk off, Hazel, that is probable. Glenn says it's a Crystal Morrison type scenario. It is. Hazel agrees. His sister mentioned land was muddy, so put the cops off looking, right? Stephanie has a question. Have any of the cases you have covered ended up being related to a Jane or John Doe? So the answer is yes, Stephanie. A couple. One was Chris Turner in Las Vegas. His remains were found and could not be identified. And then through DNA, he was eventually the bones were eventually connected to Chris. That's a Las Vegas disappearance. So that's one that comes to mind. And then the Noah Davis, because they found a bone and could not identify it for a while. And then the episode came out, and then somewhere down the road, through DNA, that bone that was found was connected to Noah Davis. That's a couple that come to mind, Stephanie, just off the top of my head. There very well could be more. So we have had a few where remains were found, weren't identified for a while, and then somewhere down the road, they were identified. But in the process, Unfound covers that disappearance as a missing person, not realizing that the bones have already been out there and collected. That has happened. Yes, it has. Yeah. All right, let's move on. Trevor Deely. Are you familiar with his disappearance? I'm just going to read a very quick, just from Wikipedia on his disappearance. Because the reason I'm talking about this is that his father died recently. And I think in the history of Ireland, this is the most well-known disappearance. And like I said, I'd certainly love an opportunity one of these days to cover his disappearance. So I'm just going to read just a very short paragraph. We don't have time to get into all. There's some other things I want to talk about tonight. We don't have time to get into all the particulars and everything, but on December 8th, 2000, so this is a disappearance almost 24 years old, Irishman Trevor Deely appeared in Dublin, young guy, early 20s. Disappeared in Dublin, Ireland. He'd been walking home around 4 a.m. from his work Christmas party, having stopped at his office on the way to retrieve an umbrella and arrange certain things for his shift the next day. He was seen on a security camera entering and leaving his office building. The footage shows him speaking to a man dressed in black before he entered the building. This man has never been identified. Deely was later seen on another security camera in front of a bank he passed on Haddington Road as he headed home on foot, which is the last image that exists of him. Despite continuous police investigations, his disappearance remains a mystery. Now, you should know that, and like I said, there's a Wikipedia page on his disappearance if you'd really like to get into it, if you've not heard of his disappearance before. This is a disappearance I've known about for a while, well before Unfound ever started. In fact, I can remember many years ago doing Google Street View and Google Satellite View looking at the roads where he would have been walking and the route he should have taken home that night. And there is video of him, this video that says from the bank. It's online. You can find it. He's walking down there, and there seems to be somebody behind him. But this is something, a disappearance that I was really, really into for a while. And there have been some follow-ups since 2000. I remember, I think since Unfound got started in 2016, the police there in Ireland went and dug up an area. There was a rumor that Trevor's bones might be there. Of course, they were not. There have been a lot of rumors circulating around. Could he have been murdered by some Irish gang or picked up by an Irish gang? Walking home that night. A lot of different rumors. Now, what I find compelling about his disappearance, and although I've never necessarily took any notes, I'm really just talking off the top of my head on a few of these things. One thing, and you should know, there is I don't know if she tunes into the live show or listens to it maybe afterwards. There is a woman in Ireland who lives in Dublin who has been listening to Unfound since just about the beginning. Her name is Sinead. Although it's not been recently, there some years ago, she and I talked about Trevor's disappearance quite a bit. She lives there. She's been on these streets. She tells me about what the Irish have said about his disappearance and everything. Certainly helps as an American who may never make it to Dublin. Certainly has helped me kind of understand all of this. And one of the things that has always been a big question of mine about his disappearance is I'm not totally sure. If you look at where his office was and you find out where he was living at the time, I'm not sure he was absolutely 100% correctly on the correct route that night to walk home. I wouldn't say he was way off. He was going in the general direction, but what I remember is doing like a Google route. Here's the work. Here's where he lived. What's the most efficient way to walk home, from that? And he was slightly off that route, the way I remember it. Like I said, this is years ago that I did this, but this is something that comes to mind. So that has always caught my attention. Of course, he may be doing a little drinking. Maybe he was lost or thought he was on the right road. He was on the wrong road, or right sidewalk, wrong sidewalk. Maybe a little bit like Esther Westenberger probably was. And so that caught my attention. So I'm open to the idea, did he walk the wrong direction? Or maybe he really wasn't headed home that night. Maybe he was headed somewhere else. This is something that's come through my mind, because you have to understand something, that yes, there is a river. Of course, they don't call it a river. And, of course, the Irish have some other name for it. There is a river in Dublin, but it's not the Mississippi. It's not the Delaware River. It's not the Colorado River. In fact, I think Sinead told me at one time you couldn't even drown in it because it's so shallow. So he might have been passing close to this waterway or whatever, but it's not a waterway that I think is going to kill anybody. And in fact, I think if anybody were to go into that body of water, that the body would be found fairly quickly, because I think there's a dam there or something. So almost 100%, I've ruled out that Trevor was walking along and stumbled into this body of water and drowned everything. It just doesn't seem like you can do that for this particular body of water. Even though I admit he was going to have to pass over it or something. The other tough part about this is then we might be thinking, well, is this like a Daniel Villarreal situation where somehow Trevor ended up in some location and he died in some location that nobody would ever search? And that also seems unlikely. I mean, where he was, it wasn't a place where there are houses and then pool houses in the back with, this is not where he was in Dublin. In fact, I don't think there's any place like that there in the city of Dublin where he could stumble onto somebody's property and die in somebody's shed. Just doesn't seem like that could have happened. That would be like, really, although Dublin's not even close to as big as New York City, but it's like that. If somebody's walking from one place in New York City to another and disappears in the process, but there's no water around, I mean, and this is, I guess, maybe how we want to think about this, mainly because most of your Americans say, well, I know you're not. But what would we be thinking if this were an American disappearance, if some guy like this goes missing in an American city? And really, there isn't that out of, a river. Like, for example, with Jesse Ross, he vanishes in Chicago. I think a lot of people think for some reason he ended up in the Chicago River. No proof of that. But certainly it's conceivable. It's possible. Sad if it happened, certainly. But there are people, of course, that believe that he got attacked, maybe started a new life, all sorts of different theories. But you can think, well, maybe he went into this river and drowned for whatever reason. Unfortunately, this is not an option with Trevor's disappearance. It would be like Jesse Ross's disappearance, but there's no river in sight. You can see how much more complex it gets very quickly. And I'm not inclined to believe that Trevor was suicidal or leaving his family. The only thing I will say is there does seem to be thinking out there, could his disappearance have to do with he made a trip to, of all places, Alaska in the weeks before he went missing. And some people have tried to think, are those two connected somehow? In fact, if I may speak for Sinead tonight, this is something that she has brought up with me when we have spoken about Trevor's disappearance. But in looking at the route, and what's really, I think, also confusing about his disappearance is that, like it said, they had this video camera at his work. I mean, somebody going 4 a.m., that does sound weird, certainly. And then he's walking down this street. This bank camera catches him. Well, the way I remember it is that there would have been other security cameras from other kind of buildings on the way to his place, but like the one camera catches him, but the next camera along that route does not. So it's a very limited area, just a couple blocks where he could have disappeared. And like I said, back in the day, I went around and around and around I've never been to Dublin, but I got the feeling like I had been there. I was spent so much time on those streets. And I really never did come to a firm answer about what could have happened to him. This is kind of like this is like Ireland's Jason Jolkowski. Kind of the same thing. And as you would imagine, Dublin does not have a high crime rate. Not a lot of people go missing there. Trevor Deely's disappearance really, really, really sticks out because of that. So, some people, well, was he walking along at 4 a.m.? Did he happen upon a crime in progress? And, the criminals thought, well, we got to take this guy. You can identify us. I guess it's possible, but I've not heard. You would think if that was the case, the Gardaí, which is the Irish police, they would have figured this out by now, but they haven't. So it's a real stumper. But unfortunately, his father died recently, never knowing what happened to his son. What else? Let's see here. Organized crime dug up a site a few, might have been followed, but why? What kind of mugger, if he did run into some mugger, what mugger is going to attack Trevor, and then make him disappear as well. It sounds like a lot of work. It just does. Now, if Trevor were a woman, maybe that's a little different. Maybe it's Tina Deely, and she's walking home alone at 4 a.m. and some guy comes along, then that's different. So it's a real stumper. It really is. I have to admit, I don't have, even though I've covered 340 disappearances now, I don't have a firm answer as to what could have happened to him. Hazel saying might be in the canal. The only thing, like I said, Hazel, there's certainly a canal there, but what Sinead, who lives there, has told me, it just doesn't seem very likely. It's not deep enough, and any body that would go in there would be, in her opinion, seen very quickly. It's not deep enough. It doesn't have much of a flow to it, unlike the Mississippi River or something like that. In her opinion, it just, and she knows Unfound. She knows what I think about these things and waterways, and she knows about the smiley face killer hoax and all that. She just has not as a person who lives there, it's just not something she really buys into, even though she admits if he was drinking, it's possible he could have fallen there. But her opinion is his body would have been found very quickly. It wouldn't be a missing persons case, her opinion. So, she's the one that lives there. So it's a stumper. It's a real stumper. And maybe one of these days, I forget if he had any siblings who are alive. I guess his mother is still alive. Maybe we can make something happen and do do the interview across the Atlantic Ocean and make it happen. But some of you, I'm sure, have never heard of him. You can go to the Wikipedia page. Many, many articles have been written about his disappearance. I know there's been some podcasts that have been done about his disappearance. So you can check that all out because it's a real stumper. Hazel says, haven't heard of it, but I wasn't in UK then, was here in New Zealand. Might be canal. So sad his father just died. Yeah, it's all sad. Absolutely. All right, let's move on to, I was saying water might be a canal as opposed to river. Hazel, like I said, all I can tell you is that the way which Sinead told me as a woman who has been on the streets her whole life, is that the water, in her opinion, is not an option for his disappearance. That's just what she said. Let's move on to this. Can't pass up a ballerina killer story. A former ballerina at the center of a highly publicized black swan case has been convicted of manslaughter. Ashley Benefield, 33 years old, was found guilty by a jury in Manatee County, Florida. So that's, which way is that? That's down that way. That's south of me. Tuesday night. I think this was last Tuesday night. The manslaughter conviction is a step down from the second-degree murder charge originally issued against Benefield after the death of her husband in 2020. Benefield has maintained that she fatally shot Doug Benefield in self-defense. Her attorneys filed a motion last year arguing that she opened fire on the Navy veteran after she had ordered him to leave her house, alleging that he refused and he hit her in the face. The filing invokes what is known as Florida's Stand Your Ground law, which says a person does not have to retreat before using deadly force to prevent death, serious injury, and certain felonies. Ashley and Doug lived in Charleston, South Carolina when Ashley became pregnant and moved to Florida to live with her mother. After the child was born, David joined her in the Sunshine State, but they did not live together. The complaint says she repeatedly accused Doug of psychological abuse in an effort to gain sole custody of their daughter, but the allegations were never substantiated. At the hearing Thursday, Doug's family attorney, Stephanie Murphy, testified about the couple's custody battle and Ashley's claim that her husband had poisoned her with heavy metals while pregnant, discharged a gun in their home, and punched their dog in the face. To Doug, Ashley's this innocent, pure white swan, Murphy previously told CBS's 48 Hours. But underneath those white feathers, she's an evil woman, Murphy added. She's the black swan. Eva, and if you don't, I think they get that from that movie. Who was that? That was that in that. What is her name? She was, of course, in Star Wars and all that. The newer Natalie Portman. Eva Benefield, Doug's daughter from her previous marriage and the stepdaughter of Ashley, celebrated the verdict on social media. She was convicted of manslaughter. Eva Benefield sent in a TikTok video following the verdict. After 4 years of waiting, my dad got the justice that he deserves. A sentencing date has not yet been set. So she is claiming self-defense. And something that we have to understand about this is that there is the standard is imminent danger. The only way that you can claim self-defense is that you believe in that moment, in that second, that that person is going to kill you. That you're, or it's seriously bodily harm to the point that it's going to be really, 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 really bad. This is not a situation, as has been established many times, where a guy has been abusing a woman and then she seeks him out somewhere. She goes to where he lives, or she goes to his job or whatever else and shoots him. She cannot claim self-defense because in the moment, even if he has been abusing her and hitting her and everything else, in that moment, she was not in danger. She went and found him, not the opposite. So it seems that that was the standard that was being used here. Was she, even if Doug did all of those things to her that she says he did, on the day that she shot and killed him, was she really that particular day in danger of dying? This is something that is a very important part of this that when it comes to the law, at least here in the United States. If you are an abused woman, you can't just shoot your guy the next day after he's abused you when he's sitting there eating breakfast. You can't do that. That's going to be a problem. You might get away with it just because the jury feels sorry for you, but technically that is not self-defense. Legally, that is not self-defense. So the tough part about this, though, is between men and women, it's not equal. The physical abilities between men and women is not equal when the issue is violence and strength and speed. Okay, they're just not equal. So this is the tough thing when it comes to women defending themselves. Men, for the most part, once again, just in general, men, for the most part, if they want, can kill most women with their bare hands. I think we've encountered this on Unfound, where you suspect that a lot of these women who went missing, the reason they're missing is because they were killed by the men in their lives, and most likely it was due to strangulation. Just hands to the throat and holding them there until the woman can't breathe and the circulation's cut off to her brain. It's horrible. So the violence that a man can act upon a woman to kill her is different than the physical, just once again, bare hands than a woman can do to a man. I'm not saying a woman has never strangled a guy to death. But for every woman who has strangled a guy to death, I bet there are 100,000 men who have strangled women to death. Once again, because of that physical difference. Just exists. So it gets tricky when we start talking about females defending themselves against males because there is a physical inequality. So if a man's coming at a woman and he doesn't have a weapon, but she believes that he's going to kill her, and most likely she may not be able to defend herself with her own bare hands, then she's going to have to get a weapon, a knife, a gun, something like that. And then this is what I think causes a problem for women. And when it comes to these kind of self-defense situations, because what happens, here's what happens. She shoots him, and, Jane Doe shoots John Smith. He's coming after her, but he doesn't have a weapon. She's in the bedroom. He's coming into the bedroom. He's swearing at her. He's pounding on the wall. She's fearing for her life. Makes all the sense in the world. She pulls out a gun out of the nightstand, shoots him. He dies. She calls 911. I just shot my boyfriend. He was going to kill me. But what happens when the police show up? What do they see? They see a guy dead on the floor with no weapon. But they see a woman with a gun. You see how this is how these things can get very, very, very tricky and very, very difficult. Because then it doesn't, of course, if the guy has a knife in his hand, then it makes all the sense in the world. If he has his own gun in his hand, it makes all the sense in the world. But being that he's lying there in the pool of his own blood and he's dead and he has no weapon and she does, this is why I, sometimes think that, do they maybe get some, it very well may be self-defense, but have maybe some women been charged with murder, and because you don't understand that physical difference. Because men have the ability to kill women in a lot more ways than women can kill men. Once again, because of our physical differences. And this is, like I said, it just seems like something that's very, very tricky to me, because then a woman and her attorney has to prove that she was in imminent danger, that he was going to kill her, even though he didn't have a weapon. Even though we know that men can kill women without weapons, but just looking at him dead on the floor with no weapon, what does it look like? It just looks like she shot him for no reason. So I'm not saying this is necessarily what happened in this situation, but in reading this story, this is something that came to mind. Hazel, so I happened to watch some of this Black Swan trials that popped up on YouTube last week after watching live, actually. She definitely planned it, I think. No, she wasn't in danger of dying. Okay. It's just, to me, it's just like I said, I don't think I've ever even thought about this before. But when I came across this news article, it did start going through my mind. You know what? That is tough. It could be tough for a woman to claim self-defense, because a man can kill a woman with his bare hands. But for a woman generally to kill a man, she's going to need a weapon. So she has the weapon. He does not. And it ends up not looking like self-defense because, once again, he doesn't have a weapon. I wonder if it just seems like it's very, very, very difficult, very difficult. And I wonder how many women have gone to jail when they really, really was self-defense, but because the guy did not have a weapon, and even if there was a history of abuse in the relationship, that because the guy didn't have a weapon at the time that he was shot, that a jury decided, you know what, she just shot him for no reason. Even though he really was going to kill her, but there are no signs of that. Why? Because he's dead. Just something, I don't know, just seems interesting to me. But like I said, I'm really not a murder guy, but I just wanted to pass that along to you. I'm just wondering if that's ever occurred to any of you, if you've ever thought about these situations of the problem of defending a woman who was truly shot some guy in self-defense, But being that he didn't have a weapon, he just happened to be in the same room with her, it just maybe would look to a jury like she shot him for no reason. Something to think about. Let's move on to this. I've been really looking, I've been wanting to talk about this for a while, and kind of missed my opportunity because from the other stories that have come out about this very topic, but now I get a chance, even though I have only 20 minutes left in this live show. This comes from Uvalde. One of the first officers who responded to the Uvalde school massacre in Texas pleaded not guilty Thursday, so this past Thursday, to more than 24 criminal counts. Former Uvalde Consolidated Independent School District police officer Adrian Gonzalez faces 29 counts of abandoning and endangering a child in connection with the May 2022 slaughter that left 19 children and 2 teachers dead. If convicted, the state felony is punishable up to 2 years. If convicted, the state felony is punishable by up to 2 years behind bars. It doesn't seem like enough time. Gonzalez was arraigned Thursday, more than 2 years after the deadliest school shooting in more than a decade. It took law enforcement 77 minutes after the gunman walked into Robb Elementary School to take him down. As victims lay dead or dying inside classrooms, officers were seen on video waiting outside in hallways. And you were thinking this is familiar, you've heard of this. Well, you might be thinking about this, but this is kind of what happened in Parkland here in Florida as well, and I'm going to get to that. The botched response to the carnage has been described as an abject failure, with officials and experts blaming multiple entities. Gonzalez and former Uvalde Schools Police Chief Peter Arredondo are the only law enforcement officers to be indicted on criminal charges so far. According to Gonzalez's indictment, the former officer failed to follow his active shooter training. After hearing gunshots and after being advised of the general location of the shooter and having time to respond to the shooter, the said Adrian Gonzalez failed to engage, distract, or delay the shooter, and failed to attempt to engage, distract, and delay the shooter, and failed to otherwise act in a way to impede the shooter until after the shooter entered rooms 111 and 112 of Robb Elementary School and shot at a child or children in rooms 111 and 112. During his court appearance Thursday, Gonzalez waived the reading of the charges. When asked if he understood the charges against him, he simply responded, "Yes, sir." About 40 relatives of the victims and survivors packed the courtroom for the arraignment. After the hearing, some of the victims' family members followed Gonzalez to his car, shooting, "Say you're sorry." Outside court, Gonzalez's attorney, Nico LaHood, said his client feels he's innocent. There were over 370 officers there. We have not seen or heard of a theory of why Mr. Gonzalez is being singled out, LaHood said. We'll get into that more when we see the discovery, but that's going to be a long process. So, and they go into what Gonzalez said, but I know many of you are already familiar with what happened here. It's kind of, once again, it's kind of the same thing that happened in both these situations in Parkland, here in Florida, and in Texas. There's a school shooter, and the police twiddled their thumbs while teachers and children were murdered. All right, this is a situation. So, but this is just now happening that this particular Gonzalez guy is being charged. Now, this is now you need to understand something, and you do know, maybe you don't know, there was a trial that has already happened regarding the Parkland shooting. I don't know how many of you know this. Once again, very similar situations, even though it's different states, but similar situations. Shooter goes into the school, shooting the place up, killing people, and what they call the school resource officer or whoever, in both of these situations did not do anything. Yeah, police showed up, and then they, once again, in both situations, they twiddled their thumbs for a long time, and more people got killed because of it. Well, we already have a trial that already happened. That guy back in, his name is Scott Peterson. No, not that Scott Peterson. You should know that the DA brought him to trial for not doing what he was supposed to be doing in 2018. So when that shooter showed up at Parkland, this Scott Peterson guy, well, I think he didn't do what people would expect him to do. Well, you should know something. He was put on trial for neglect of his duties and neglect of allowing these people to be, these students and I guess some teachers to be shot. A jury found him not guilty. A jury did. So keep that in mind regarding this guy Gonzalez, who I think for the most part is going to be going to trial for the same reason. Now, I know this is shocking to me. I'm wondering if this is shocking to all of you. Of course, the problem is that a jury of the peers, I think regular people like me and you, in the Scott Peterson trial, once again, not that Scott Peterson, unanimously decided that this guy was not guilty of neglect. And there was nothing that he did that day that was criminal. Now, as I think, although I don't, like I said, I don't know if I've been wanting to talk about this for a while on this live show, but I don't think I have. I think I've talked about this maybe with some of you one-on-one, maybe through email. I've certainly talked to my buddy Dave about it. And I continue to say, if I would have been on that Scott Peterson trial in that jury, I would have hung that thing forever. And I think I know that I would have found him guilty. And you should also know, all the law enforcement people rallied around Scott Peterson here in Florida and said that he did the best he could and everything else. So they supported what he did in not doing anything. It's shocking. It's shocking because you have to remember this. This is something that once again, I've had a while to think about this, not just because of the Parkland shooting from back in 2018, but then the more recent one in Uvalde, is that this is a hypothetical. This is the way I think about this. This maybe is a good look into the mind of Ed Densel and how I think about many topics in life as you're ever going to get. First of all, what are these police officers doing on those campuses in the first place? First of all, you have to remember, they carry guns on campus. And I'm pretty sure that if, once again, theoretically, hypothetically, they're out there, standing out there, doing whatever on the grounds of the school. And let's just call the guy's name John Smith. Officer John Smith is standing out there doing whatever. He sees a car pull into the parking lot of the school, and a guy with a gun with like an AR-15 jumps out of the car. What are the expectations that you would think that this police officer is supposed to do? I think everybody would agree that the police officer's responsibility, the resource officer, whatever you want to call him, his duty is to do what he can to stop that guy with the AR-15 of going into that school, right? Right? I mean, nobody certainly thinks that he's supposed to be, oh, Mr. Gunman, allow me to escort you inside. Let me open the door for you. Sure, certainly not. I know I'm joking around, but I'm trying to make a point here. Everybody on the face of this earth would agree. If the resource officer is out there and a guy with an AR-15 walks onto that, everybody in this earth would expect that police officer to do something. But what this not guilty verdict is saying is, should this guy with the AR-15 get into the building without the police officer noticing. The police officer's on the north side of the school, and the guy comes into the school on the south side. Once the guy enters the building, then the police officer has no responsibility whatsoever, even though that's where the victims are. Do you see how paradoxical and confusing that is? So outside, if he sees the gunman before he ever gets inside, he has a responsibility to do something. But as soon as the gunman gets inside, where actually that's where the gunman wants to be, all responsibilities of the police officer are let go. And I don't think this is an argument that the prosecution made in the trial of Scott Peterson. This is how bad this is. This is how bad this is. Doesn't that seem paradoxical to you? They're supposed to do something. There's no victims but Officer John Smith out there. But once the guy's inside the school, it's like, oh, no, I got no responsibility. Then what are you doing there? You're there, you're with a gun. If the guy gets inside and starts shooting up the school and you don't have any responsibility for that, then what are you doing there? Just collecting a paycheck, I guess. It is crazy. But like I said, a jury of the peers over there back in 2018 for Parkland, the jury decided he was not guilty. It just doesn't seem possible. Then how could they find this guilty? Well, in looking at and reading up on it as much as I could today, you should not be surprised that it's a very technical, it comes down to legalese, and it has to do with the idea of child neglect. Unfortunately, in my opinion, the jury went with the law a little too much on this. The reason I think the jury decided the way it did is, first of all, to charge somebody with child neglect, the person who is being charged with this kind of neglect has to be defined as some sort of caregiver. So we might just simply think about parents and children. There is a contract that a parent has with the child, unspoken, unwritten, that parent has the responsibility of doing certain things for the child. And if that parent doesn't do it, then it's child neglect. What the issue is that a resource officer, a police officer on the campus of a school is not considered to be a caregiver. That is the technicality, I think, of why this Scott Peterson guy got off of these charges. So once again, I have to ask the question, if they're not going to do anything under these circumstances, why are they carrying a gun? What are they doing there? What are they doing there? And it's also disgusting that all these law enforcement people came to his defense. I have it written in my notes. Another reason I think that he might have been found not guilty, I'm going to continue to say this. I just think here in the United States, we put law enforcement on too high of a pedestal. I do. Too high of a pedestal. As I've talked about in so many things in life, the human ego cannot take a lot of praise. And what I mean by that is that healthfully, we can take a lot of praise, but what happens, our egos, we get arrogant. We then think we are above people. The human ego can only take so much praise before it becomes unhealthy for the person who is getting the praise. I know I'm getting real deep into human psychology. And Rockford saying, and everybody should know, I think Rockford is a liar. Rockford is saying, I think your quarrel may be more with the law itself than with the jury. I agree that law enforcement and the government in general is put on way, way too high a pedestal. The question is then, what are they doing there with guns? Like I said, I just, of course, as you heard just me say, Rockford, the prime example. Guy with AR-15 shows up in front of the school. Being that the the resource officer is not considered to be a caregiver, then I guess he has no responsibility to take on that guy with the AR-15 at all. And once again, what's he doing there? Why is he with the gun? Why is he there with a gun? So, but once the person is inside, once the killer is inside, then the guy has no responsibility. I guess what I'm saying, Rockford, is it very well may be, I would never let somebody like this get off because the law is written wrong. I would never do that. I would never do that. I'm just going to be honest. I would have hung that jury from now. I mean, everybody knows me by this time. I would have hung that jury from now to the end of time. I would say there's no way that I'm going to let this guy get off of this. At the very least, there's going to be another trial. I don't want to have anything to do with this. There's no way I'm going to sit here and say not guilty. I don't care what the law says. This is wrong. This is wrong. But so when you start thinking, going back to this Uvalde situation, if you're thinking that this Gonzalez guy, it's a slam dunk, it's not. And in fact, I even read something, there was a writing about this, that some judge said that the government has no role. It's not the government's role to protect people. I forget where I read it. It's somewhere in, I thought I copied it. Maybe I did. Hold on. Let me see here. Hold on. Let me see if I copied that. Criminal negligent. No. I guess I didn't copy that, but I had there's a paragraph written somewhere where some judge on appeal or somewhere said, yeah, the government doesn't have, his role is not to protect people. So do you think all of these parents who had their children going to Uvalde and Parkland thought that? I agree with you. Law enforcement should change to address the duty. Keep in mind that as a judge, you are stuck with the ladder of the law, but a jury member can nullify the law. Jury nullification is controversial, but it's valid. Well, I certainly would have done it. I like I said, I just, my conscience would never be able to live with finding something like this, to be not guilty, and especially knowing children got killed. Maybe some of you know these stories. These guys, and I guess some women too, just fiddled their thumbs for hours, and a bunch of kids got killed. And see, this is also the issue, Rockford. We know about the shooting in Nashville, which is now well known because it was a badge cam. That kid went in there and was shooting up that school in Nashville. Police showed up. They went in, found that kid. Now, unfortunately, I think a teacher and some children died anyway. But they went right in there. Within 5 minutes, that kid was dead. Now, once again, how can you say that both actions are correct or legally correct, morally correct, or whatever you want to say? Because everybody in Nashville was absolutely happy that this team went in there and killed that guy, and it was all on the up and up. It was all legal to do. But now in Texas and Florida, police don't do anything, and guess what? It was legal to do that as well, even though both actions are completely the opposite. Drives me nuts. nuts. So, but like I said, I continue to believe that we just hold police in too high regard. There's just too many stories that continue to get out more than ever about police not doing their job. Things that we as citizens who aren't police officers expect them to do, and they don't do it. They do not deserve the high praise that they get. They're just humans like anybody else who picked a particular profession. That's it. Drives me nuts. I can't take it. Can't take it. And it was just not one. It wasn't just one Scott Peterson. There were a bunch of them. And likewise with Gonzalez, it wasn't just like these guys were alone. There were a bunch of people who chose to do the same thing. They should all be fired. All of them. Gone. Gone. Yeah, I'm not defending law enforcement at all. Not for a moment. I'd say that if one is betting on the government to defend him or his kids, it's a bad bet to make, but I don't want to make this political. Yeah. Okay. Rockford. So there you go. There you go. And want to check that out. So if you're going to be following that trial in Texas, if it goes the same way it did here in Florida, do not expect that Gonzalez guy to go to jail, even though surely what he did was certainly immoral to the point of, enough of immorality that it's illegal, no matter if the law says it is or isn't. All right, this Friday, we're actually going to cover a child disappearance. Speaking of Texas, we are going there to Aransas Pass, Texas. Aransas Pass, Texas. We're going way back to 1989. In fact, tomorrow will be the 35th anniversary of this disappearance. August 6th, 1989. Blanca Elisa Robertson. She was 13 years old. She was walking down the street to meet a friend at a local elementary school, and they were going to walk back to that friend's house. The walk was only a few blocks. Her friend ended up showing up at the school. Elisa did not. The friend ended up eventually walking back home and calling Elisa's house saying, "Hey, where's Elisa? I was supposed to meet her there." Of course, Elisa's family did not know where she was. She was never seen again. This is one of those disappearances. You know how I avoid child disappearances because you don't know who to trust. All I will say in this one is surely Elisa's family had nothing to do with her disappearance. So I felt very comfortable in presenting this disappearance to you. So you can start to look that one up if you would like. Blanca Elisa Robertson, Aransas Pass, Texas, August 6th, 1989. Her sister Ruby, who was 12 at the time, a year younger, is the guest. She, of course, did a fantastic interview. So that's all I got. Went over by a couple minutes tonight. They could hear the shooting ongoing and did nothing. Cowards, Smith says. I agree. G.A. Smith says. I agree. Lisa, you're welcome, Lisa. And so that's all I have for you tonight. Thank you so much. Give this video a thumbs up before you are done, before you leave tonight. If you're listening to this as a podcast, give this podcast a nice review. And you will hear me interviewing Ruby on Friday. Hope you enjoyed everything tonight, including my deserted island story. Pleasure to tell it again. Keep your heads on swivels out there. Charlie, say hi to the kids for me. Good night.